Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the third annual William K. Reilly Awards Program. This program is one of those classic win-wins in my book. We stimulate informed and constructive dialogue. We bring together leading thinkers and policymakers. We prepare our students for productive and rewarding careers, and at the same time, we honor the tremendous contributions that Bill Reilly has made to U.S. and global environmental policy. It is a thrill to be part of this program and gratifying that so many of you could join us here tonight. We see this event and our other activities as a way for you to renew relationships, build new ones, have a good time, and make valuable connections that can benefit our environment. So our mission as a university center is to improve environmental governance in the United States. We do this in many ways, through dialogue on key issues, analysis for effective policymaking, research on better governance, and by educating students to be problem solvers. As our program has matured, we have focused especially on issues like policy and technology innovation, water resources and sustainability, and how best to use private investment to complement public policy goals. So before moving into the program, I would like to thank the many people who have been vital to the success of this program. Let me begin with Bill Reilly, of course, who has been a thoughtful, gracious, and enthusiastic supporter of this effort from the start. I just want to say, as many of you know, that all the terrific things you hear about Bill are true. Bill will be the featured speaker at a program we are having on May 11th with the Children's Environmental Health Network and the Woodrow Wilson Center on the social and economic impacts of climate change for children's health. So if you are interested, you might want to look into that. We are also planning a dialogue on water and energy issues in partnership with the Bipartisan Policy Center later in the year. We are thrilled to have Chad Holliday with us to share his thoughts on American environmental leadership. He is, of course, a well-recognized leader in corporate environmentalism and sustainability with a global reputation. And Chad, we all look forward to your presentation. At American University, President Neil Kerwin and Dean Barbara Romzek, the Dean of the School of Public Affairs, have strongly supported this initiative from the beginning. My colleagues Karen Baylor and Bradley Hardy worked with me in selecting the scholarship winners for this evening. We also have benefited greatly from our wise and brilliant program advisory board. They contribute in so many ways. Special thanks tonight to Stan Abramson, Gail Bingham, Tim Fields, Jessica Fury, and Joanne Shatkin for serving on the Leadership Awards Committee, as well as to Francis Prisnar from Hitachi Corporation, who has served both as a board member and a sponsor for many years. Of course, we would not be here without our sponsors. Thanks to Steve Harper and Intel. They have been a special source of support for this program, as have MDB and the Bipartisan Policy Center, all for the third year in a row. We also are grateful for the generous support from Beveridge and Diamond and Hogan Lovells for the program. We are indebted, of course, to our good friend, Gordon Binder, who has been indispensable from the beginning, as has SBA's Development Director, Dan McCabe. Thanks to our student assistant, Serena Sue, for her help, and my own very special thanks to Danielle Miller-Wagner for her superb organizational skills and dedication to the success of the entire Reilly initiative. We are delighted this evening to be presenting William K. Reilly Leadership Awards to Fred Krupp and Ben Grumbles. Both exemplify the collaborative, innovative leadership with integrity and grace that we associate with Bill Reilly. We are very proud of our scholarship winners, Jennifer Hatch and Amy Purpura, both of whom will someday, I'm sure, be on a stage getting their own environmental leadership awards. It is now my pleasure to introduce the Dean of the School of Public Affairs, Barbara Romzek. Dean Romzek joined the university 3 years ago. After holding several leadership positions at the University of Kansas, she is a leading scholar in the field of public administration and accountability, a fellow of the National Academy of Public Administration, and she's been recognized by her peers with several major awards for her contributions to the field. So please welcome Dean Barbara Romzek.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate that introduction. On behalf of the School of Public Affairs, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all of you tonight, our distinguished guests and our champions of environmental research. I first, of course, need to thank Dan Fiorino for his outstanding work leading SPA's Center for Environmental Policy. As a leader in environmental policy, education, and dialogue, the center is a critical part of our agenda at the School of Public Affairs. The center's role is to bridge academia, business, nonprofit, and government worlds, and Dan's work as leader of the center has shown he is a master at that. I'm also pleased to have Bill Reilly back with us today. At SPA, we have benefited greatly from Bill's leadership and guidance as we work to advance the activities of our Center for Environmental Policy. Bill has been a true and valued partner. Now, a bit of breaking news. Bill will also serve as SPA's commencement speaker on May 9th. So if you... So for those of you who are in town, yeah, you can come on May 9th and hear even more wisdom from Bill. Thank you, Bill, for all you do for us, and welcome back to campus. Now, it is an honor to recognize this year's Reilly Award winners, Ben Grumbles and Fred Krupp, both of whom are leaders in the fight to protect the environment. My congratulations to each of you. Both of you are leaders in the fight to protect the environment. Without your leadership, the world would be much worse off. I also want to congratulate the SPA graduate students, Jennifer Hatch and Amy Papura, on being selected as the 2015 William K. Reilly Scholars. These scholarships are awarded annually to MPA and MPP students in the School of Public Affairs. They have demonstrated a commitment to forging careers in environmental or energy policy and demonstrated academic achievement. Please. The news is filled with stories about the environment and public policy implications. Earlier this week, Republican presidential candidate Ted Cruz said satellite data show the globe isn't warming. And just yesterday, there was an article that noted several major scientific developments in the area of climate change that have come to light in the past few months. Also yesterday, the U.S. Supreme Court heard a case that challenges EPA's regulations of harmful emissions from coal and oil-fired power plants. I'm sure most of you in the room know more about those regulations than I do. Each of these developments should have inspired massive action around the globe. But because the projected effects of climate change are so complicated and so far into the future, the political impact has been difficult to get any traction on. So the impact has been nil to date. Now, last week, the TED conference was held. I expect this is a conference many of you are familiar with, where those famous TED Talks come from. This year, out of dozens of speakers, not a one focused on climate change. Now, to their credit, the TED Talks always have in the past always had several talks that speak to climate and environmental issues. At SPA, we see the importance of keeping the environmental policy dialogue front and center every day, every year. As scholars of politics, public administration, policy, and the law, we see our role at the school as informing the conversation. We take our research and translate those findings into knowledge that is accessible to the broader public and helps inform the public affairs conversation. The way we see it, SPA is not only accountable to our academic peers, to our students, and to the departments that make up the school. As a School of Public Affairs, we're also accountable for educating the public, for educating the public about the broader public policy issues that they should care about, but just don't have the information at hand to know how important it might be. As such, we're constantly working to ensure that we are engaged on the important issues of the day. And of course, the topic of the environment is one of the most pressing public affairs and policy issues of our time. We at SPA have prioritized that translation of research in the area of the environment. Just a few weeks ago, the School of Public Affairs held an exclusive briefing for reporters at top national media outlets. Our topic was the politics of science. Believe me when I tell you that the room was full beyond capacity. There were no fire marshals around, so we just went ahead with it. Our Center Director, Dan Fiorino, was one of the faculty members who spoke to these reporters. He spoke about the science of climate change and environmental politics and how those political values color our interpretation of science. The media in attendance were engaged. They wanted to know how they could do the best job possible reporting on science. And the answer is work with us. Work with the School of Public Affairs, and in particular the Center for Environmental Policy, to help interpret environmental science and understand its policy implications and explain those policy implications to the broader public. As director of the center, Dan has done an exceptional job engaging those beyond the media as well. He worked with representatives of business, nonprofits, and federal government on the center's focal issues. I am proud to say that the Center for Environmental Policy is working very hard to do its part to educate the public about these important issues. I'm especially proud to announce that just a few months ago, the center was awarded a $500,000 grant from the David and Lucille Packard Foundation. The grant, made in honor of Bill Reilly, establishes the William K. Reilly Endowment for Environmental Governance and Leadership. The Packard Foundation gift to the center is a tribute to the substantial contributions Bill has made. In addition to his 15 years of service to the Packard Foundation Board, he has made significant contributions to environmental and education and environmental policies in the United States and around the world. I don't need to tell you that. You all know of his accomplishments. But my thanks again to the Packard Foundation. Please. My final thanks go to all of you here. Your presence tonight and your support of the School of Public Affairs, the Center for Environmental Policy, and the Reilly Fund is important to the future of this country, to the future of the globe. You are all champions worth celebrating this evening. Thank you.
Good evening. Thanks to Dan and Barbara and our hero, Bill Reilly, and all of you for being here tonight. It's truly a pleasure to be here this evening, but particularly to present the first of the Reilly Awards that we're giving out tonight. This is a special honor for me because this individual is someone who richly deserves this recognition. The awards committee of which I'm a part, as being a member of the board, met several weeks ago to review several tens of nominations for this recognition. And we thought it was going to be a very difficult job going through those applications and making a decision. But as we went through this process, the awards committee found that our task was going to be really easy, because the individuals that we selected for the award recognition were those who stood out among the others. And there was a consensus that these particular individuals deserved the recognition of receiving this award tonight. One of those individuals was Fred Krupp. Fred Krupp is the president of the Environmental Defense Fund. He has led this organization for more than 30 years. He is a New York Times best-selling author, a recognized expert on climate change, energy, and sustainability. He has great environmental credentials and has grown this organization tremendously over the years to now being an organization with a staff of 500, a budget of $130 million annually, and a membership of more than 1 million. He has offices in the United States, Beijing, London, and Mexico. He is a powerful voice for regulation and enforcement during the time of the Energy Secretary's advisory panel for shale gas production. He has focused national attention on the problems of methane emissions and has led EDF as it established innovative corporate partnerships. He was educated at Yale and the University of Michigan Law School. He was also a gold medal winner in the 2006 World Rowing Masters Regatta. He's in a lot better shape than I am, I assure you. He has been profiled in a number of national media publications. He was named by U.S. News and World Report as one of America's best leaders. We all agree that he is. So many of you know that side of Fred, an innovative, visionary leader who has led EDF as it has pioneered new horizons and a new brand of environmentalism. However, as I talked to some of his close friends, we learned that there's two other sides of Fred that are not as well known or not as well publicly communicated. But we want you to know about it tonight. Fred, sorry, Fred. He is an environmental and data wonk, according to his close associates. As many of you know, this is a term of endearment and affection at American University, where we use the term to talk about those members of the AU community that apply their knowledge and passion to have an impact on the issues of the day. So if you don't really believe me, just ask Fred tonight about the TSCA reform legislation being debated on the Congress, or hazardous chemicals in consumer products, or methane leakage from oil and gas. He'll talk to you about it, but just get away from him because he'll tell you about it. Lastly, Fred also has a very compassionate side and has an incredible passion for those who work for him. Their health and well-being are number one for him, the employees and their families. I was told about several stories where colleagues had a health issue that was very serious. Fred opened up his Rolodex and began to make calls on their behalf and made sure that they were connected to the very best health care to deal with the issues that they were facing. This is the part of Fred that you don't hear a lot about, but it is part of what makes him a very special man and someone that we're recognizing tonight. I'm proud to present a 2015 William K. Reilly Award to Fred Krupp.
Thank you, Tim. I greatly appreciate this honor, and if it's merited, it's certainly merited because of my many colleagues at the Environmental Defense Fund and our partners and our allies that join with us to make a difference. But it's particularly meaningful to me because it's named in honor of my good friend Bill Reilly. And I guess I'd barely been at EDF for 2 years in 1986 when I found myself featured alongside Bill in a Los Angeles Times article, "Third Wave Alters the Course of the Environmental Movement." And it talked about the fact that the Conservation Fund, of which Bill was president, and the Environmental Defense Fund were moving away from confrontation and lawsuits and towards more constructive alliances. I remember in being interviewed for that story telling the Los Angeles Times reporter that I'd been on a radio talk show on a Chicago radio station when one of the callers was a founder of Earth First. He admonished me that the goal, he admonished me actually First, that we absolutely had to be uncompromising, and that the goal wasn't to appear reasonable, it was to save the planet. To which I responded, I thought that it was by being reasonable that was exactly the way we were going to save the planet. And I still believe that today, and I think Bill's career has supplied a lot of the evidence. When Bill was head of the EPA, he led the charge to redo the Clean Air Act amendments of 1990, and we worked together on one set of those provisions on acid rain, which became the acid rain cap and trade program. Bill later worked at the Texas Pacific Group, and we again had a chance to work together to remake a whole utility under new ownership, and the utility dropped its plans to build 8 new coal-fired power plants. More recently, of course, Bill has been co-chair of the BP Oil Spill Commission, where we worked together to persuade Congress to dedicate 80% of the BP penalties to restore the Gulf of Mexico ecosystems. So you can see the environment owes a lot to Bill, as do I. I'm also pleased to be here tonight with Chad Holliday, who led DuPont when EDF worked with DuPont to come up with a framework for the development of nanotechnology products. And we published an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal describing that framework, many sections of which have been adopted. Chad was also a co-founder of the United States Climate Action Partnership, a group of environmental groups and companies who raised their hand saying there should be a firm cap on carbon emissions in the United States. Today, happily, our nation has begun the task of reducing emissions through a combination of vehicle mileage standards, state standards, the low price of natural gas, and in anticipation of EPA's new Clean Power program. China's climate commitment is also heartening, and EDF has been working there on the development of a nationwide carbon trading program. 2 weeks ago, in fact, the International Energy Agency announced for the first time the world's emissions of carbon dioxide didn't go up, even as the global economy was expanding. Of course, that's not good enough. We need the emissions of carbon dioxide to begin going down, not just staying at the same level. And so must emissions of methane, which account for 1/4 of the global warming that we're now experiencing. And so must emissions of nitrous oxide. One of the biggest sources is the misuse of fertilizer on farm fields. So we've got our work cut out for us. And I think back to a time when we passed those Clean Air Act amendments by a vote in the Senate of 89-11, a vote in the House of 401-21. In fact, there's not a single major environmental law that's ever been passed without bipartisan majorities. And this year, we have a chance to pass bipartisan legislation on chemical safety to improve the safety of chemicals in consumer products. We also have a chance this year to begin to depolarize the politics surrounding the climate debate. As my college engineering professor, a tall, soft-spoken Texan named Charles Walker once told me, people can solve a lot more of these environmental problems if they just lower their voices. We must engage more widely, listen more carefully, find common ground, and make sure that common sense prevails. Thank you very much for this award.
very bright light here. I'm Steve Harper with Intel. As Dan pointed out earlier, this is the third year that we've sponsored or co-sponsored this event. We're very proud to be associated with the center. I think they're doing great work. We're very proud to be associated with the good name and leadership of Bill Reilly. My first exposure to Bill was back in the early 80s when I worked for Doug Wheeler at the American Farmland Trust. And Doug is here tonight. Bill was one of the inspirations and founders for that organization. And he's obviously gone on to do great things since then. I think the center, under the dean's leadership and Dan's leadership, really has grown remarkably in the last 3 years. I think this event is a great event, thanks to Danielle and others. I'm also pleased to be in the same room with Fred Krupp. Fred and EDF, I think, set the pattern, which a lot of other organizations have followed, but they I think, were the first to set a pattern of cooperative engagement with business from the environmental community. And finally, Chad Holliday. Intel, when I went to Intel 17 years ago, it was clear that our EHS programs were all benchmarked to DuPont's. We're now in a situation where a lot of other companies benchmark to us, but we certainly have built upon the good work at DuPont. I have the honor here to present the award in the public service category to Ben Grumbles. Ben, I've only known Ben for a short period of time. You know, my experience working in and around EPA has mostly been in the air office, but in the last couple of years, I've gotten a chance to know Ben and work with him and appreciate what a true professional he is. First, a few of the biographical quantitative facts. Ben hails from Louisville. Did I pronounce that right, Ben? Close enough? He has a degree from Wake Forest, law degree from Emory, as well as a master's in environmental law from GW. Ben recently became the Secretary of Environment for Maryland, and there's a story here. I was walking back shortly after the election, walking back from a water quality trading meeting with Ben to Metro Center Station, and Ben said something about, you know, he was going to look in to see whether he could find a position in the new administration under Governor Hogan. And I said, but Ben, you live in Virginia. And he said, yeah, so. I said, well, do you know anybody in the governor's camp? He said, not really. And I came away from that thinking Ben was either totally delusional or a real mover and a shaker. Prior to going to MDE, Ben, for 3 or 4 years, led the U.S. Water Alliance and has been a real leader in promoting the concept of One Water and also getting some traction around the idea of we have to price water correctly in order to make sure that as a resource it's properly managed. Prior to the Alliance, Ben was at the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, where he did some work with some of my colleagues in our operations in Arizona. We're one of the largest employers and certainly the largest manufacturer. And my colleagues in our operation there tell me that it was a great relationship during his tenure there. From 2004 to 2008, he served as assistant administrator for the water program under President Bush, and has, prior to that, a number of years spent serving on Capitol Hill. And he's also served and continues to serve on a number of boards that I won't mention. So much for the facts and the quantitative aspect of Ben's leadership and career and why he's here today receiving this award. First, I have to mention parenthetically that these are kind of strange times for people in the Mid-Atlantic if you follow politics. I'm a long-term Marylander, and I grew up, I grew up elsewhere, but I grew up politically in this area thinking several things were true. Maryland generally elects Democrats. Virginia generally elects Republicans. And every once in a while, Maryland sends one of its governors to jail. Here we are in a situation where Virginia's elected a Democrat, Maryland is elected a Republican, and Virginia seems to be sending one of its governors to jail. I do some work in Annapolis with a group called the Chesapeake Conservancy. Joel Dunn, the executive director, and Joanna Ogburn, one of the senior staff, are here tonight, as are several board members. I think that there's a lot of nervousness, particularly in Democratic circles, but in environmental circles generally in Annapolis with the election of a Republican governor, although I think Governor Hogan's record historically has been pretty green, and I think that has militated against all-out panic. I also think that Ben's appointment to his new position has or will shortly, as people get to know him and work with him, make people understand that you can do environmental policy in a bipartisan way at the state level. I think a lot of people are just getting to know Ben, but I've already heard some anecdotes of people who've met with Ben, presented their cases on various issues, and have come away thinking and believing that Ben is an honest broker, has a good sense of humor, and is a bridge builder. So bridge building is where I want to end. One of the funny stories that I collected, most of which I can't use, when I talk to people who know Ben better than I do, comes from Brent Fuel, who is here tonight and was Ben's deputy at EPA for several years. And he showed me, actually, because I asked for evidence that this was in fact true, that Ben not only builds bridges among people he wants to work with, but he builds bridges among people who want to work against him. And what Brent showed me was a letter signed by two people who probably never signed another letter jointly in their political careers, Hillary Clinton and James Imhoff, both opposing, in a letter to OMB, a proposal that Ben had floated for some creative financing under the Clean Water Act. So Ben is not only a bridge builder, he's a bridge builder among people who don't really want to be on the same bridge together and not necessarily want to work with him. So with that, Ben, please come up and accept your award.
Thank you, Steve. So after that glowing introduction and the aura of it all, I'm tempted to say I'm speechless, but I don't want to raise expectations. I can't help myself but to say a few words, but it really won't be policy-driven. It's more about thanks and appreciation for this. This is truly such an honor. It's an honor to be awarded. It's an honor to be associated with the Center for Environmental Policy and the great work that Dan and his team have been leading. It's a true honor to be receiving a William K. Reilly Award and a true honor to be on the stage with Fred Krupp. And to be able to see in the audience all these folks who I have worked with over the years and admired and tried to follow is great. So my first shout out of thanks is to my wife, Karen. And Karen and I have known each other for about 24 years or so. And what you don't know is that pretty much I think on our first date, I knew this was a big deal. I learned all about her hopes and dreams, and she learned all about eutrophication. I think I was grading exams as part of an adjunct faculty gig at a law school, and that was one of the topics. And she's a good sport and will go along and travel great distances with me. Like others, I have to pay tribute to Bill Reilly. I was working on Capitol Hill at the time, and he was showing great leadership on matters such as 404C vetoes and no net loss of wetlands, as well as the Oil Pollution Act, and this tremendous embrace, this public embrace of One Water. We didn't call it that at the time, but it was also known as the National Estuaries Program, and regional collaboration to make meaningful progress. I have to say a few words about the tremendous array of stars out there from EPA, former and current officials and employees. What a wonderful time I had there. So many things to mention, but I won't. Just, only through the true leadership of staff and administrators, I was able to be part of some really big things like Tracy Meehan's sustainable infrastructure and water quality trading, and the WaterSense labeling program, and EPA's really first climate change strategy in 2008, because climate change is water change. It was all about water. My experiences in Arizona were brief, but a real blast. It was so radically different, just a great opportunity to serve with great people and focus on some very important issues relating to air and energy and the nexus between water and smart growth. And then this warm embrace I received when I moved back to Washington, D.C. in the end of 2010. This truly unique organization called the U.S. Water Alliance welcomed me in and allowed me to be on a platform of, as Steve Harper says, embracing one water and integrated holistic approaches to help move the country towards a national water policy that recognizes differences but absolutely focuses on the value of water and the power of innovation and collaboration. And then my last, one of the most wonderful experiences I've ever been given, and that is the opportunity to serve Governor Hogan and work with Mike Richard, who's the Deputy Chief of Staff here with me tonight. I've lived in the Chesapeake Bay watershed for 30 years, but I've never really had the opportunity at the state level working for MDE, the Maryland Department of the Environment, to really get involved. I'm really honored. All of you know of the rich tradition of predecessors of mine in Maryland Department of the Environment, Jane Nishida, Sherry Wilson, Bob Perciasepi, all of these great leaders, officials at EPA and also in the state of Maryland. I'm really excited about the future. I'm really excited about working with agriculture on the Eastern Shore, the phosphorus management tool that Mike Richard and I have been spending a lot of time on, ozone transport, and it's all because we all live together, we all live downstream or downwind, and so true collaboration and bipartisanship are the key. I want to give a special thanks to some real leaders who have been in public service and private service and NGOs. Randy Benn, what a leader. He's an EPA official. He also does tremendous work with youth and on policy all around the country. Other folks like Brent Fuel, Eric Myers. It's just a real honor to be part of this broad team of leaders who really want to make a difference and do so through bipartisan collaboration. And as I just learned at an event I was at recently a few weeks ago, you stand up to be seen, you speak out to be heard, and you sit down to be appreciated. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, you can imagine that this is really a satisfying evening for me. I just bathe in all of this, the nice things that you all are saying. And of course, it is a selected audience. We carefully look over the list of invitees. There are many people in this town and elsewhere who would not agree with a lot of the nice things that were said, but we don't invite them. Ben, you are, as Secretary of the Environment in Maryland, disproportionately responsible for a treasure for the Chesapeake, in which a lot of us have invested a certain amount of our energy and resourcefulness. And Steve Harper's introduction of you reminded me of a session we once had with the governors of Maryland, Virginia, Lieutenant Governor of Pennsylvania, and the Mayor of Washington, and myself, the Chesapeake Bay Council. And we were trying to make a real impact about the needs that the Bay had and the various progress measures that we could identify. And I was sitting next to the Mayor of Washington, and I remember thinking, well, the television lights are hot, but they're not that hot. He was sweating a great deal. And when at the break some of us wanted to use the men's room, we found ourselves blocked by Washington policemen. Well, we did make news that day, but the news we made was that one of the counts the FBI cited in the indictment of the mayor had to do with what he was doing in that men's room. It had nothing to do with Chesapeake Bay. But the Bay goes on, and we go on, and we have our hopes and aspirations invested in you, and are very gratified that you are where you are and that you've had the very distinguished history that you have had. As for our other nominee this evening, Fred and I do in fact go way back, and one set of encounters particularly stands out when pollution rights trading was being considered, and we were defending the proposal with the environmental leadership. The custom was for the leaders of the major groups to each have a certain few minutes to make their case to me in my office. And when it came to the Environmental Defense Fund, and EDF made the case for pollution rights trading, sulfur dioxides trading, as it has now been enacted and used and implemented, the other environmentalists in the room tended to be quiet and to look at their shoes. It was not a popular initiative in that community, and it was one of the many times that Fred and the Environmental Defense Fund stood for something at some cost, with some independence, an absolute clarity of their vision, and certainly that is the measure in the Clean Air Act for which it has become so well known. Very significant reductions in sulfur dioxide at a cost that was, I think, less than a tenth that predicted by the electric utility industry and less than a third of the cost predicted by the Council of Economic Advisors and EPA. It's one of the great associations we have. Fred also can take credit for making that cap permanent. I remember late one evening toward midnight, I got the Chief of Staff's agreement to making the cap permanent. And the next morning he took it back. And I said to him, the deal's already done. And he said, well, I think it's a very big mistake for the economy. Well, it's been a terrific achievement for the economy, for the industry, for the economy, and for the environment. So it's in no small measure a tribute to the Environmental Defense Fund and to Fred. Well, it's my pleasure to give the scholarships to two outstanding students for which the competition is very serious. And I have had occasion to read the essays of the two winners, and as I was telling them this afternoon, where Chad and I had a court class that we conducted with many of the students, they are uncommonly well-written and insightful. And I really respond to things that are well-written, first of all. But our winners are really terrific. Amy Porpura is a first-year MPP student with a concentration in quantitative methods and environmental policy. For undergraduate, she attended West Virginia University, received a BA in political science and philosophy, summa cum laude. After graduation, she worked as an intern and reporter for the Public Policy Foundation of West Virginia, where she wrote about local and national issues and their policy implications for the state. She later worked last semester at the Children's Environmental Health Network as a Reilly intern, and while working there, examined the impact of environmental hazards on children's health and development in children settings from a larger public health perspective. And she cites in her essay the importance of having grown up in a state where the reconciliation between the environment and the economy is particularly sensitive and important, and where a lot has been done in the name of energy that has savaged some of the most beautiful parts of the state. Amy, when I was hired by the Council on Environmental Quality in the White House, just before, 2 weeks before the first Earth Day, all of the well, I only had about 5 or 6 people who were working there then were asked to go out around the country and give speeches about the environment. And I was told to go to West Virginia. So I drew a big crowd in West Virginia. The Council on Environmental Quality was new then, and people wanted to know what it was all about. And so I was a land use lawyer, so I gave my speech on land use. And I finished it, and old fellow stood up in the back of the hall, and he said, young feller, somebody starts a speech with the remark, young feller, I think you can expect trouble. He said, young feller, you all spent much time in West Virginia? I said, no, sir. I had given the sort of standard talk about good land use planning, stay away from steep slopes and wetlands. And he said, well, you might be interested to know that steep slopes and wetlands is about all we got. And I think your sophistication at your age is considerably more than mine, certainly with respect to those issues, demonstrated by your essay and your award here tonight. And it is a great pleasure for me to present you with this scholarship. Our second awardee is Jennifer Hatch. She's a first-year MPA student pursuing interest in local government and environmental management. After graduating, again, summa cum laude from the College of William and Mary with a degree in government and environmental policy, she began her public interest career with a Connecticut Public Interest Research Group as a consumer advocate and grassroots campaign office director. Jennifer moved to Washington to serve as the national director of the PIRG Energy Service Corps, where she managed a multi-state AmeriCorps program working with college student volunteers to promote energy efficiency. And this sparked her interest in working at the local level on issues related to energy, the environment, efficiency. And she currently manages a network of nonprofit organizations at the Catalog for Philanthropy. She's interested, by the way, in pursuing a local fellowship with the district's Department of Environment. Anybody here from the mayor's office? On sustainability of the district or the District Department of Transportation, which she will use this scholarship to support. I note that in each case of these awardees, they elected to distinguish themselves in areas that involved state or local government initiatives. One of the really wonderful features of the United States is when things may be quiet or frozen in Washington, there's often a great deal going on at the state and local level. That's true in our field. It's true in climate even. And I think both of our awardees recognize that and are likely to make very distinctive and important contributions in those areas. So please come up, Jennifer, to collect your fellowship. Grumbles, I think, has a number of jobs. Jennifer, Amy, you wanna? In the course of my experience, I have had occasion to meet many outstanding leaders of business, and I am privileged to introduce someone now for whom I have more admiration and respect from any I have ever served with or encountered. it always struck me as wonderfully counter when people like Chad Holliday would deal with the anxieties expressed by members of the Senate, for example, the Environment and Public Works Committee, about how horrible it would be were American corporations to be subject to Kyoto. And Chad Holliday, as chairman of the country's largest then chemical company, would appear at the witness table and say, we have dozens of plants subject to Kyoto. To it seemed to me the astonishment of the senators, and was able to explain. Jeff Immelt, also of the United States Climate Action Partnership, which Fred was part of and mentioned, had a credibility and an indisputable history of experience that seemed to me insurmountable. Well, I once found myself, as chairman of the Environmental Policy Committee of the DuPont board, trying to get a ratings agency to explain how they had ranked DuPont relatively low in response to climate change. And I remember talking to the rater, and he said, well, the principal reason was the answer to the question, is your senior management and is your board concerned about climate change as a threat to your business model? You answered no. And I said, well, we answered no because Chad Holliday has transformed the company basically to adapt and prepare for and profit from climate change. He moved the company out of textiles and out of pharmaceuticals. He moved it into solar energy and biofuels and seeds that are drought resistant or flood resistant. In one case, seed that I've always been particularly intrigued about is a Pioneer company seed. Pioneer is a subsidiary of DuPont that deals with the fact that corn, which typically requires something like 135 frost-free days, can now, with this seed, produce with only 75 frost-free days, meaning that you can move the corn belt north as climate change occurs and take advantage of the rainfall that's available in Canada. Well, Chad's company, during his tenure, achieved a 70% reduction in greenhouse gases with a saving of, as I recall in my time, something like $3 billion in energy cost. He was marketing director for CFCs when those were phased out and substitutes were discovered and then promoted, and the company did a very great favor for us all when the Chinese were very reluctant to get out of CFCs, and I remember meeting with the Chinese Minister of Environment. You done? Well, you're still having an impact. I don't know what you're thinking about for the rest of the presentation, but are you going to allow the free speech here to go on, or in an atmosphere that universities typically do respect? Well, in any case, I will introduce Chad with one point, and that is that I think it's sometimes overlooked that for those who are interested in climate change, President Obama made a commitment to reduce greenhouse gases in the United States by, I think it was 17% by the year 2020. And we're about at 11 or 12, my understanding is right now. And the reason we're there is largely as a consequence of the conversion of coal-fired power plants to natural gas. The natural gas has been obtained, everyone knows, I think, primarily by fracking, which is an initiative of the oil and gas industry. So it's worth attending to the fact that that industry has made a very significant contribution to our addressing the climate change problem. And Chad is now chairman of Shell International. He was 10 years chairman and CEO of DuPont, during which, as I mentioned, he did transform the company, made it a modern model for adaptation to and sensitivity to climate issues. He is one of the founders of the World Council for Sustainable Development. He has walked the talk for longer than most of us, and I have profound respect for his history and career, and I'm really honored that he would come here and give this keynote tonight. Chad, will you take the platform?
Bill, thank you so much. You are so cool under fire. I mean, it's a real honor to be here tonight. Ben, Fred, just fantastic accomplishments. Fred, I was thinking back about that nanotech op-ed that we got a little slack when we did that one too, if I remember right. So, Bill, your leadership around this subject is what shaped everything I've done. I think you know that. When I retired from DuPont, Bill would say, well, you're going to need to be on the Climate Works Board and just thing after thing after thing. And I said, okay, Bill, what are we going to do next? You know, and so it's just been such an honor to work with you. Everything Bill did for DuPont was so critical, but Bill, what strikes me the most is you forced us to set really challenging goals. So we come in with a goal for a 10% improvement, and Bill would say, I was thinking about something a little better. You know, kind of cocks his head a little funny way. You know how you do that, Bill? And I said, well, how much more were you thinking about? He said, well, maybe 10 times more than what you were thinking about. But he'd say, take a few years, take 5 years, take 10 years. But us get there to really big goals. With a company like DuPont with its technology should be able to do that. And I think it's because of those big goals, Bill, that we were able to accomplish what we did. But the spark that kind of moved DuPont actually predated Bill. And it's the spark that I think was so critical. It was November. It was a cold, kind of rainy day. We had a chemical plant in New Jersey, and 6 o'clock in the morning, Greenpeace climbed the fence, climbed the water tower, unfurled this big banner that said, DuPont #1 polluter, aimed it right toward this major bridge where everybody was commuting across the Delaware River, and waited for the TV trucks to come up, you know, with the cameras. They did everything so good except the word polluter was so low. Because everybody was calling in saying, DuPont won another award. It must be big because you never hang a banner from your water tower. And what is it? True story. The plant manager handled it just fantastically because the TV trucks were there, and he focused on, we got to get these people down safely. We'll talk about the issues, very much the way you handled tonight, Bill. We will talk about the issues at the right point in time. And I recall the next day is we were all sitting around the meeting, and we're kind of patting ourselves on the back as, you know, we did pretty good, you know. We were a little worried about how to get over the fence, but everything else we thought we'd done really good. And then toward the end of the recount, one person said, you know, but they're right. And you could have heard a pin drop in the room. So what do you mean they're right? You know, we don't pollute. Oh, yes, we do, you know, but it's all within permit. It's all okay. And then Ed Willer, our CEO at the time, heard that discussion and said, no, it's not okay. There's no reason why we have to be the biggest polluter just because we were the largest chemical company at the time. Instead of goal, we don't want to be in the top 10. And it was that goal that was sparked by a little bit of agitation, which was, I think, helpful at that point in time. I think played a big role to Ed then going out and recruiting Bill for our board and making a big difference as we move forward. So tonight, what I'd like to share with you is something I hope will be useful to everybody in the room, and that's the thought about goals, because that's what Bill was so critical for DuPont. And I think if you get the goals right, no matter what organization you're in, whether it's a personal goal, organizational goal, societal goal you care about, you got a lot better chance of making a difference. If you spend a lot of time working on the wrong goals, I think it's a lot harder. So I'd like to just to share with you a couple things from my experience that maybe not in the standard goal book that would be useful for what you're doing. The first one's around being sure you include all the stakeholders in your goal when you develop it. And by all the stakeholders, your adversaries are a stakeholder in your goal too. You might not think of them that way, but they think they have a really big stake in maybe you not accomplishing your goal. So that's critical in what you're doing. It struck me when I had the opportunity to work on a UN project starting about 5 years ago, that it really came home. I need to tell you a little bit about how I got involved in this UN project. I'm an engineer. I like to be very thoughtful about the way I do things, but this was a little bit different example. So I had a buddy at the UN that I owed a favor to. I had backed out of something I needed to do, and he said, you have a chance now to pay me back. We're starting a high-level commission on sustainable energy for all, and we need more business people to be a part of this commission. Would you be a part of it? It's only going to meet 3 times, so I'm going to run 14 months. If you show up for the first meeting, that's enough. You don't have to come to any more meetings. The first meeting's in New York. Take a train up, be real easy. So I show up. I go in to put my bag down, so I look for all the names around the horseshoe table, and my name's not there. So I say, okay. So I go see my friend. I said, my name's not there, no problem. I'll sit here in the back, no issue. I'm going to come to one meeting anyway. He said, your name is there. You just didn't see it. I said, I know my name, but So he said, wait a minute. We go back in just before we start. So we walk back in, get in the front of the horseshoe, and he points to the end of the table and says, there's your name. I said, my name's not there. He said, yes, it is. It's called co-chair. You can take either one of those co-chair seats you like. And I said, you set me up. He said, yes, now you can walk out of here right now. The Secretary General's going to walk in and say wonderful things about you because I wrote them. I know what he's going to say. But it's up to you. I said, okay, where it is. My other co-chair was Conde Yamkela from Sierra Leone. Conde is one of the most special people I've ever met. And we had the job of developing the goals for sustainable energy for all. And the notion kind of says we want to get energy, electricity to the 1.3 billion people that don't have it. We want to get a clean cook stove to the 2.4 billion that are cooking on something that's going to make their lives very premature. So I was thinking about sustainable energy for all, that we got to do that in a sustainable way. It kind of made sense. Conde was thinking very different, even though he cared greatly about his people from Sierra Leone. He said, if we do it that way, and we're that limited, we're not going to be successful. We've got to make our goals not only the access for those I just described, but we've got to double energy efficiency in the whole world, the rate of improvement in energy efficiency. And we got to double the renewable mix of renewables in the whole world, all by our 2030 goal. And it was because Conde saw that the way we were going to get the Northern European countries that are our major funders today on board is we had to make sure we had goals they cared about. So rather than competing with us to say that we're going to get more money for access and we won't have money for those other things, we had to make them 3 goals together. And we had to bring in companies that could do that. I learned so much from his experience in Sierra Leone and some of the terrible issues that we've all read about in the last 2 or 3 years that his country's facing. And so there was a really different in how you set out your goals to get started. Second example of thinking about your stakeholders, I had the honor to serve on a commission led by President Calderon of Mexico called the New Climate Economy. And President Calderon called and said, would you be a part of this? He said, it's very simple. We want to answer the question, is it really the choice of we're going to deal with the climate issues in the next 15 years, or are we going to deal with the economy? Because we're still, the economy's still not back on track yet, in case you had noticed from the 2008 recession. And is it possible that we could do them both at the same time? Or if not, if the answer is no, then we accept it's not, and we have to make a choice or a trade-off. And for 14 months, we worked on that and came up with an answer. I can report to you the answer tonight. It's going to take $89 trillion to build out the sustainability part of the infrastructure if we do it the way we've done it in the past between now and 2030. If we do it in a sustainable way that's going to make not all the greenhouse gas reductions we need, but a lot of them, it's going to cost $92 trillion. Yes, it's going to cost 3-4% more. But when we start doing that the right way, we're, of course, building a much different foundation. This is hard numbers done by tough-nosed business people pushing the numbers. And so what I think we've set up, and we've had a chance to go around the world, kind of explaining this to people, it doesn't have to be a choice, environment, economy, and we've got 20 very simple steps. I commend you to the report, New Climate Economy Report, if you haven't seen it. But I can say it was done because we were trying to say it doesn't have to be either or, we've got to include both. So my challenge to you in the first case tonight, if you think about your personal goals, have you included both? Have you included your adversaries? Have you included all stakeholders? Because if you include them early on, it will make a tremendous difference. Second topic is now thinking more about companies and the kind of goals companies should have. I think the most important thing is focus on goals that are really with the core of your mission, the core of your capabilities, the core of what you know how to do, the markets you serve, the products you make, to be a success. If you try to just set goals that maybe even society imposes those goals on you, but they're not key to what you're doing, I think you will come up very short. I experienced it at DuPont, and Linda Fisher's here tonight, and she's had such a big role over the last period in setting those goals, but DuPont's an R&D company. So we set a goal for what percent of our R&D is being spent on sustainable projects. Very logical thing to do. We're a new product company. We report how many hundreds of new products we produce every year. Well, how many of them have their core purpose of doing something around sustainability? Very straightforward goals that the employees could relate to that would make a difference. And I think that's very critical as we go forward, is that we think about those kind of goals moving out. As Bill mentioned, I just joined the board of Shell. Our CEO, Ben Van Beurden, a great guy, first said, I'm going to lead in this climate change thing, but I'd like to lead from behind. I think it'd be a little safer back there. I said, Ben, did you really listen to yourself when you said that? You're normally a pretty logical guy. And he said, well, we just can't stick, it's all these problems, we just can't stick our heads out quite so far. And I said, well, Ben, why don't you just go think about that a little bit? He came back in 2 months and said, I think you're right. If we're one of the largest energy companies in the world, even though we've got good goals, we support a carbon tax, we support a number of things I think a lot of people in the room would agree in, we're not where we want to be. So we're in a process right now of looking at what should our goals be. And we have some, but we know they're not adequate to what we need. So I'd like to share with you a couple of the building blocks that we're searching for from Shell. And I would appreciate your comments later which ones of those you think we should build it on. How many has heard of the Shell Eco Marathon? Has anybody heard of that? Not many people have heard of that. Me, if we count everybody in the room. The Shell Eco Marathon started in 1939 when some Shell employees in the U.S. decided to build some cars to see who could get the best gas mileage. In that first race, the winner got 50 miles per gallon. 1939, not bad. My guess, if you'd sat around that room in 1939 and said, someday we'll have a commercial fleet that's approaching 50 miles per gallon, they would have thought you were crazy. So we've now continued the Eco Marathon since then. We just had the last race in February of this year in Manila. Who would like to take a guess at the gas mileage of the winning car? This is a question. How much? 84. 84. 450. 12? No. Infinity. Almost. 3,740 miles per gallon. 3,740. It was a group from a technical university in Thailand developed the car. 75 times what it was in 1930. And we're sitting here now and say, well, we could never have a commercial car at 3,740. Maybe. So I think that kind of dedication to improving eco-efficiency over a period of time, sticking with it, and I'm not saying that car, the 3,000, something you drive to work tomorrow, but it's certainly something that at least went for a gallon's worth of gas. The second area we looked at, and we're focusing on what we could do, is what's our reach? And Shell is the largest branded retail number of outlets anywhere in the world, more than McDonald's. 43,000 retail stations globally, all branded with that Shell emblem, which does not have the word Shell written on it, just has the yellow shell, if you will, because it's so unique in what's going on. By the way, that symbol was first developed in California, and it was after consumer testing of what Californians would like. Bill, you get appreciation for this. The yellow-red was somehow very suitable for you Californians, so it worked out quite well. So I said, if you got 43,000 retail stations, how many customers do you have? And I've been asking that question all around the world as to how many, and I get this really funny answer on how many customers you have. And I was in Singapore 2 weeks ago, and a guy came in with his V-Power Shell shirt on, looked like he just worked in a garage. And he's a good marketer because he knew what he was doing with that shirt. And I said, how many customers you got? Oh, that's an easy question. We got 10,000 a minute. I said, 10,000 a minute. And I said, well, how many minutes a day? Well, it's 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. But 10,000 a minute. So if you start thinking about where Shell might build its environmental goals, it might be around energy efficiency, and it might be around 10,000 customers a minute, because if you could have an impact on those 10,000 customers, what kind of difference could you make? So I think, Fred, when you challenge us to goals, yes, we'll work on the methane goal. You got my commitment earlier today. But also, think about where companies can think of things they naturally do well, and how do we build on that? So that's my message from the second point. Look at things you naturally do well. That could be as an individual, any organization you're in, or it could be a societal goals. What do we naturally do well, and how do we build from that? So as I come here today, and Bill and I had a chance to talk to a number of students this afternoon, I come away very encouraged. Because what I see is levels of technology we've never had before, a new generation coming into the workforce that cares greatly about these topics and getting it right. And I see a real light at the end of the tunnel by 2030 that we can actually have a turning point and deal with the issues that everybody in this room cares about so much. Thank you very much.
It is a bright light. I'm Diane Wood, president of the National Environmental Education Foundation, and I'm here to make a few closing remarks and acknowledgement on behalf of my fellow board members as members of the advisory board of the Center for Environmental Policy here. And just as a small aside, the foundation I run was created by Congress in 1990 through the National Environmental Education Act, which was a vision of the late John Chafee and the very present Bill Reilly. And the foundation was created to work in partnership with EPA and other federal agencies to advance environmental education nationwide. And I'm honored to be running that, and something that you founded, Bill. Thank you, Chad, for your remarks and for taking the time to be here to honor Bill. And thank you also for all you've done to really make sustainability part of the corporate DNA. And now I get a chance, because I'm up here on the podium, to make a few remarks about Bill, without whom all of this would not be possible, the events, the awards, the scholarships. So a little of my personal story. As a young girl, I cared deeply about biology and wanted to go in the medical world, and I was lucky in my undergrad and graduate work to be inspired by many professors to shift that love of biology into ecology and environment. And I then went right into the Peace Corps for 3.5 years and was working in the country of Paraguay to establish environmental education programs for the country and create a national biological inventory. I came back to this country having served in Peace Corps, ready to serve. I wanted to take everything I had learned and apply it to getting a seat at the table in the conservation community. This will date me, but back then, as a woman who decided to go into the programming side of conservation as compared to going into the operational or administrative side of nonprofits, it wasn't that easy. It wasn't so easy to take what you cared about and fit at the table and have a chance to have a voice. But along came Bill Reilly. And Bill Reilly invited me out for lunch when he had just taken the position as the head of WWF and still the Conservation Foundation. And he wanted to talk to me about Latin America and I was astounded that he was that humble to ask somebody with very little experience to talk about Latin America, because he was taking over the World Wildlife Fund, and he wanted to do what he could to learn as much as he could about developing countries. That turned into many lunches and a fabulous friendship, and he also offered me a job at World Wildlife Fund, and I had 15 incredible years there, one of the most privileged opportunities you could have. And I would say that that and the job I currently have, that without a doubt, no exaggeration, Bill Reilly changed the course of my life. And I know there are many of you all over this room, and those of you who are not here, who would be able to say the exact same thing. Somewhere in my house, I've got a box of papers, mementos. I'm sure you all have them. I'm getting closer to that age where I can say, maybe when I retire, I'll go through them. I'm positive that in that box is a piece of paper torn out of a calendar back when we used daily planners and calendars and carried them around with us, ripped out, and on it, I know it says, Lunch with Bill Reilly. May have even said William K. Reilly at the time. So I must have known then the significance of that first lunch and the lunches that followed and what that did for me in my life. So thank you, Bill. It's an honor to be standing here. And I think that what's also special is, for those of you who know Bill well, he's a busy man. He has a very full calendar, and he has 4 delightful grandchildren that he relishes. So he doesn't have a lot of free time. But many of you can say that he took a moment, in my case, changed the course of my life, many others in their careers, he still fits you in. He finds a way to fit you in the busy life he has as he's moved forward. So Jennifer and Amy are Reilly scholars. Congratulations. And as you rocket to fame, and I'm sure you will, and we'll probably see you here at some point, don't forget, learn a little something from Bill. Be willing to invest in others on your trajectory so that you can have a chance to have the kind of impact that he has had. And Fred and Ben, as we heard from Steve and Tim about you, yes, you have these awards for the accomplishments that are so well known about both of you. But I also think you rose to the top in a highly competitive process for awards because you also included others. You were both inclusive, the remarks about you, the bridge building, what you think about your employees. I'm sure the sphere of employees and former employees around both of you everyone would be saying that they were glad that you have played some influence in their lives, and they are thrilled that you're both getting honors in the spirit of what you did and the spirit of what Bill Reilly inspires. So congratulations to both of you. And thank you, Dan Fiorino and Dean Barbara Romzek, for your leadership for the center. It has been fabulous over the last few years to watch it grow and evolve, and we know it will continue to grow and evolve under your leadership. And last but not least, thank you, all of you, for coming tonight, for your support for the center. We can't do it without you. It's wonderful to have you here, and please keep an eye on center activities that will be going on throughout the year, and please come and attend all of those. Thank you very much.